I want to talk a little bit about Tim Walz, because I actually thought that his record overall, but specifically his military career, which I want you to speak to, was something that was going to get a lot more attention. This idea of stolen valor. And there's a lot of, it's not one thing, right? It's several things. As someone that actually deployed to Iraq, that fought for the country, explain to people who maybe haven't served, because so few now have, why what Tim Walz says and does offends veterans.
Sure. I think it really, there's a lot of things that have been mentioned. Some of it has to do with the rank he talks about. Some of it has to do with talking about military service. Let me get this part out front. I admire anyone that serves in the military. I think all service is honorable. Not all service is the same, but all service is honorable, right?
Right.
And I think him giving, I think it was 24 years in the National Guard and serving as a senior non-commissioned officer, I think all that's honorable. I think it is perfectly within his right to talk about that service and to talk about how it informed his worldview and maybe some of his policy positions. I may disagree, right? I don't think his military service justifies his policy positions, but I think it's useful information and it's relevant, right? Now, he made a comment about how he was a command sergeant major. From what I understand, he served in that capacity, but he wasn't able to keep that rank because he left the military. From what I understand, shortly before his unit deployed. Some people say that the paperwork was put in before they got their deployment orders, whatever it is. Let's set that aside. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt on that, if you would like, right? I'm going to give him
wait, hold on. On the rank issue or on the deployment issue?
On the rank issue and on whether or not.
The rank issue, just to be clear, the rank issue is twofold. He was basically frocked, right? So he got selected for CSM. And I think that for non-military people too, the other thing that I know some of my friends have brought up is the fact that you weren't just a sergeant major, you're the command sergeant major, okay? But he was frocked, meaning he got selected for the thing. Then he didn't serve time and grade, that's one, and he didn't complete the course that would have allowed him to actually.
He shouldn't be going around saying that he's a
retired command sergeant major.
Yeah, he shouldn't be saying that. That is technically wrong, right? But again, he served in that capacity. So again, I'm trying to be as generous as I can.
I know. Okay, fair enough. But I just want the audience to understand why people have an issue. I get it.
Yeah,
so
he's wrong. He's wrong. He shouldn't have said that. But you could understand how he was just generalizing. Here's where I have no tolerance. When he uses as justification for wild infringement on your Second Amendment rights, and he says, well, nobody should have the sort of weapon I carried during war. He is implying right there, if not directly stating, that he served in combat, that he went to a war zone, that he did none of that. He served in Italy in 2003 as part of the global war on terror. Now, as I like to joke around, I'm like, wow, they sent me to Iraq. I had no idea Italy was an option.
Well, Governor Walz is using his military experience to explain why certain guns should never be in the hands of private citizens, namely the sort of guns that he carried in war. Now, where exactly did Tim go to war at? Italy, which would be super impressive if it was 1943, but it turns out it was 2003 in service to the global war on terror, which, imagine how silly I felt. I mean, they sent me to Iraq. I had no idea Italy was an option.
Right, there was no fighting going on in Italy. He was not risking his life. He was not going out there. He was not patrolling. He was not going and getting bad guys. He was not rolling down roads where IEDs were going off. He was doing none of that. But when he says, like the sort of rifle I carried in combat or I carried in war, everyone is automatically thinking, wow, this is a guy who put his life on the line for the country, who understands the necessity of this, and so we should listen to him. That is when it becomes stolen valor. You are stealing from the people that actually did that, a credibility you did not earn, and then are using it to justify putting yourself in a position of power, and in this specific case, to then deprive people of the very rights that other people went to fight and preserve. Like, that's the part that is so insulting about this for me. It's not just that he lied about being in combat. He is using that lie in order to justify being in a position to deny rights to the very people that actually did what he claims he did.
Right.
And that is something where, look, you should not overlook this. This is horribly insulting. He should apologize. But instead, the press is going, above and beyond to try to cover for him. And then they have the audacity to go after J.D. Vance and say, well, J.D. Vance only did this in the Marine Corps.
Which, by the way, and that's right. But the thing is, that was J.D. Vance's MOS.
Yes.
Like, you don't get to go, hey, I mean, without getting into it, because I don't like bringing it up, I mean, you don't get to pick. They do it for you, and then they say, this is what your billet is, this is what your orders say.
You have some say, depending on what you do. You have some say over your military occupational skill, right? You can choose what you do in the military to a degree. When it comes to deployments, that's less certain. A lot of it just depends on where you're at. And then once you get over there, obviously you're going to serve in combat in the capacity that you were trained to serve.
Correct.
But the bottom line is that J.D. Vance went in there. He went into a particular military occupational skill set. He was deployed. He went over with his unit. He did his job. J.D. Vance gets to say, I went to combat. Tim Walz does not. And the fact that the media is covering...
Well, but it's also, but it's not even what J.D. Vance gets to say. It's that he's never claimed anything that wasn't false. I mean, that wasn't false, right? Yeah. He's not lying. He said, I served in the Marine Corps. I went to Iraq. True. He didn't say I was a badass and I knocked down Saddam. He just says, I went to Iraq. Okay, that's true. It didn't say I went outside the wire and rolled up bad guys.
But Sean, can I say what this... all this reinforces is what we already knew. The press and a large contingent on the left, they don't care about the military service unless being able to speak to the military service is useful for the accumulation of power.
Well, but let's look at the Virginia situation just this week. Trump goes to Arlington in Virginia to pay honor with the Gold Star families of some of the 13 families. Mm-hmm. The Biden administration, Harris nor Biden, has actually ever contacted these families. He goes with some of them. And now there's a controversy today about whether or not an official at Arlington, and that's the controversy, not that no one else went.
Yeah. Well, no, but again, Sean, this is the part where I keep going back and looking at people. It's like, yes, we should be mad about this. We also should not be surprised at all. I mean, how much more evidence do we need that the mainstream media is totally in the bag for the Harris campaign, right? You can get mad all day long about them engaging in obvious lies, obvious subterfuge, obvious campaigning in the name of what should be objective journalism. But we all know they're going to do it. So stop worrying about what they're doing and focus on what we need to do. That's what I get back on. I think it's perfectly fair for us to point it out, but I think we should be pointed out from the perspective of not saying, oh, we needed a course correction from these media outlets. We need to be like, once again, we are reinforcing, we are stacking the level of evidence again to demonstrate that these organizations, they don't care about the soldiers, the Marines that were lost because of the failed pullout in Afghanistan. They do not genuinely care about military service unless these things are useful for the accumulation of power. They don't care about these things for their own sake. That's the best way to put it. Right. They do not care about these things for their own sake. There's not some objective morality that they're appealing to saying, yeah, you know what, regardless of what you think about Trump, he's right about this. You're never going to get that. Why? It's not useful to the accumulation of power.
Yep.
So
always about power. That's the thing. It's about power and control. That's all this comes down to. That is why every single issue, right? I tell people all the time, why do you think they don't care about the border? Because it's more votes, more power. Why do you think they want to make DC a state? It's not about voting rights. That's an easy answer. You and I both know that the part of Virginia that used to be DC was given back. Give back the part of Maryland if you don't think that it's being used properly, and give them the voting rights. It's about power. 2 more Democratic senators. It's always about power. Whenever you scratch the surface of an issue that a Democrat is talking about, it comes back to the accumulation of power. They never want to solve welfare. Why? Because they need power. They want to get rid of your guns. Why? Because it comes back to power. Always about the accumulation of power. Yeah. I want to pivot to Virginia specifically for a second, though. I mentioned Arlington and what's going on there. There's a Senate race, Hung Cao versus Tim Kaine. And then obviously when Trump left Arlington, he went to this Vietnamese restaurant in Falls Church, a big, huge Vietnamese population there that actually is fairly supportive of Republicans, and then a huge Asian community in Northern Virginia. Let's just talk quickly about where is the race in Virginia right now? Because with Biden, it was dead even. Where is it now that Harris is in there?
I mean, Harris got a bump just by virtue of not being Biden. The problem is that I don't think she can sustain it over time. And so if you're looking at the polls today, you're probably thinking, oh, well, Virginia's unfortunately going back on this trend that it's done before. I don't think it has to be that way. Now, I don't think anybody should be confused that Virginia is going to be a very tough battle. It's going to be very, very difficult. But is it possible? I think so, in part because one of the things that's interesting, and Hung Kao has actually done an excellent job on this, is that for the longest time, the Democrats divided a large sector of the voting population in Virginia based off of race. It was Republicans hate you because you don't look like them and they're all a bunch of white guys. And what people started to realize, especially after the Youngkin McAuliffe race, especially after they watched what Democrats were doing to them in their schools, doing to their kids in their schools, is that all of a sudden, you had a lot of minority parents calling up Democrats going, hey, why can't my kid get into TJ? They've got like a 4.5 GPA.
Thomas Jefferson, it's a school in Northern Virginia for gifted arts and science, right?
They're the wrong race because they're Vietnamese, because they're Asian. And they were basically being told, oh, well, you're a bigot, you're a racist. And they're like, wait, what? And one of the things Hung Kao has done, one of the things a lot of people started to do in Virginia is they said, look, this idea that Republicans are all white dudes that don't like people that look like them has always been wrong. It's always been wrong. What unites Republicans are values. We don't bifurcate society into people that look like me and people that don't. What we tend to look at is, do you have shared values? If you have shared values, you're welcome. And that's a very unifying message to people, right? Because all of a sudden, your status within the Republican Party is not determined by your race or your sex. It's determined by your work ethic. It's determined by your commitment to certain values. It's determined by your ability to work hard and achieve something and take responsibility for your own life. Well, it turns out that message appeals to a wide swath of people because a lot of the reasons why people come to this country in the first place is because they're fleeing a government that set up a system that determined how far they could go or what they could keep with what they earned based off of their race or their sex or their economic status. That isn't what we do here. And so a lot of minorities that might have first come to the United States or maybe that have lived here a while or multi-generational who thought that Republicans are just anti-immigrant or Republicans are just anti-minorities have recognized that no, our values align. You love America. You want to be part of this. You want to work hard, raise your family. Our values align. That is not true with the Democrats. Insofar as your minority status is good for them in the accumulation of power, you are welcome. The moment you don't use your minority status in order to give them power, they kick you out or they treat you like a traitor. And let me give you one perfect example of this. Speaking of Virginia, I sat there in a committee where we were talking about Second Amendment issues. And somebody brought up that one of the laws that we were trying to repeal was a vestige of Jim Crow. Right? There was laws on the books in Virginia that said that you got to go through this permitting process to conceal carry. And the reason why it was put into place is because they were allowing local officials to selectively choose who could get a concealed carry permit and who couldn't. And one of the most glaring pieces of evidence of this was Martin Luther King Jr. was denied a concealed carry permit. Give me a break. And so the delegate brought this up. And I watched as a member of the committee, and as I watched as one of the witnesses from the NAACP said, I don't need a white person to tell me about Jim Crow. And so a black delegate, A.C. Cardoza, said, oh, you needed to come from somebody that looks like you? Okay, I look like you. He's absolutely right. He's correct. This was a vestige of that. And then I watched as Delegate Munden King, black delegate from I think Prince William, Stafford area, said that this is why some people are skin folk and some people are kin folk.
Oh.
She basically called A.C. Cardoza an Uncle Tom. Now, why? Is it because A.C. Cardoza isn't black? No. Is it because A.C. Cardoza hasn't had experiences as a black man in America? No. Is it because A.C. Cardoza hasn't overcome challenges? No. He served in the military. He's a member of the House of Delegates. Why was it that all of a sudden, all of the things that the Democrats tell us should matter, race, experience, lived experience. Why did it not matter the moment AC Cardoza made an argument in favor of your Second Amendment rights? Because he betrayed the left.
Yep.
Right. And that's what really matters. You only get the privileges that the Democratic Party, mets out for race, sex, sexual identity. You only get that if you stay in line with leftist ideology. And the moment you leave, they will punish you for it.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.